Hey class, this is a lab where we are going to add an end game sort of part to the end of our level, and we're also going to design a level. So the level design part is not really new stuff, but it's just going to kind of go over some of the principles that we talked about last week. But we are going to add some new code and a new scene and a couple other things, and we're going to do all of that from scratch. So as we're getting more comfortable with Godot, one thing that will help you guys be able to add stuff on your own is seeing how you actually build things from scratch rather than using the templates that I've been giving you. So for the next couple labs rather, we'll be trying to do some stuff from scratch, and I'll go over what we're doing. We'll be writing some code as well, and I'll give you guys the code to use, but you'll also be able to see how to add the code and create your own scripts. And so you could potentially start experimenting with adding your own functionality to your game. Anyway, let's get started. So today we're gonna create our first fully designed level. We're gonna use some of our level design concepts for that. So we're gonna take a look at these notes, and I'll just write down a few concepts here so that we can keep them in mind for later. So let me just get my sketchpad out. And so we need some guidance. We'll do some simple guidance. That's pretty important. We need to do the mechanics, the obstacles, the rewards. So those are all pretty essential. Other aspects of it are kind of optional. So let's just write down the other possibilities. So there's foreshadowing. We'll do that early on maybe. Branching is pretty easy. Bottlenecking, maybe we'll do at some point. Let's just write it down. Bottlenecking. Layering will probably happen somewhere. We'll see. And what else? Risk versus reward, that's a good one. I kind of ran out of space, so let's just put it over here. Risk v reward. Let's see, anything else? Gating, I probably won't do any gating because that's gonna require some more code that probably don't want to spend a lot of time for. Safe zone is another concept that might be easy to add in. We'll see if that comes up. And there's other things that we talked about in class, but those are some basics. So I'm just going to leave this list here, and so we can come back to it later. One thing that you are going to have prepared is some art. I made a couple extra pieces of art. You guys could make more. One of those is like a little menu thing for when you win the game. So I made that. I actually made that as part of my game over. So here's my game over sprite, and I wanted it to be like similar dimensions. So I just made a new frame and then just wrote you win in here instead of game over. And so I'm going to go ahead and export this. And one thing that, I'm just going to export the one frame because I don't want both frames, but I want to make sure that it's the right size. So I'm going to go to MMP 270 and go to my latest project, which is actually the midterm, and find that sprite. So let's see, game over. So that's 500 pixels wide by 144. So I just want to make sure that that's right. And I can see the scale at 2 is actually 500, so that's good. So I'm going to download this frame. Okay, so there's my game over. You can see it added a 2 here because it's the second frame. But obviously that's, we want to call this you win. So when I do go to my downloads folder, where is it? I should have opened it somewhere. I don't see it, so let's just open it up. So if we go to downloads folder, I have a couple things in here. Whoops, let's just get rid of these. So there's my you win, but it's called game over. So I just want to make sure to call this you win so I remember what it is. And then the other thing I made is this like little tree portal. For today, I'm just going to use it as like the end of the level. But I basically have just like the tree, and it's just a tree. I just picked a tree just because it was simple. But for today, when you get to the tree, it's going to play this like little glowing animation. It's kind of silly, but just wanted to make something real quick, and you'll win the game. What we'll do in the second lab for this week on Thursday is we'll turn it into a portal, so it'll actually like teleport you to the next level. And so we'll be able to make new levels after that. Anyway, we need to download this. So I called it tree portal. I'm just gonna go to export. The scale is 2.0. That might be big or small. We can always change it later. And it is an animation, so I'm gonna download the sprite sheets. And that has the right name, so I don't need to rename that. And so I have my 2 images. Those are really the only 2 new assets that I need for this. So I'm gonna make a new project folder and put these in here. I'm gonna duplicate this again just so I can keep track of my progress, but you guys can just put this directly into your lab folder if you want to. You don't have to make duplicates, but you can if you want. So I'm gonna duplicate this. I guess we're technically on lab 8, so I'll call this lab 8. Lab 7 was exporting and that turned into the midterm, so this will be lab 8. And so I'm just gonna drag my new images into my sprites folder. That looks pretty good. And so I'm good for that. So I'll just close this folder. Here's my lab 8 folder. I'm just gonna open up project.godot. If you don't have that set up on Windows, you might need to open Godot first and then open the project. But at this point, you should kind of have that set up. So let's get started. So we're gonna add a bunch of new things in here, starting with like our real level 1. So there's a couple of things we have to change, actually starting with the start menu. So that's good that we open to the start menu. And we're gonna design our first level. So one thing that we're going to change real quick in the code is we want to make a way that we can open different levels. So I'll post the code for this, but I'm going to go over what's happening as well, so we can start to learn more about what we're doing with the code. So this is our start menu. If I click on the script tag, it's opening this little script, and you can see where all these different signals are connected to the different buttons in the start menu. And then there's one signal that's connected to a button in our main game. So what I can do here is, instead of just opening directly this main scene through that path, I can create a exported variable, which is one of the variables that shows up in the editor, so that I can choose the path based on different scenes or different places where my script is. So this code is actually kind of the most confusing looking code that we're gonna write, but I'm just gonna do it real quick. So the way that we make the variable available outside of our code is using export. I'm just realizing now that my text is very small here. I wonder if there's a way that I can change that. Let's see, editor settings. Let's see, theme. Let's see if I can search for font. No, let's try size, border size. Editor, okay, main, here we go. Okay, so let's change the code font size to like 18. That looks better. Okay, so that'll be hopefully a lot easier to read on the screen. Sorry, I should have thought about that before. Anyway, we're gonna export a variable. What we want for this variable is we're actually gonna give like a couple different options here. So, whoops. What we wanna do is give a few different options that will allow us to pick different types of values to put in here. So one of those is a string. A string is what we actually already have right here, which is just like a path to some data. Another option is a file. So we could load a file here. And then we're also going to specify that we want it to be a scene. So we're going to say .tscn. So that will prevent us from adding like an image or something by accident. Then we need to use var. So var is just a shortcut for variable, which in programming is what we call any piece of data, whether it's like a number or a name or a string value or anything else like that. So we create a new variable, var, and then we just have to give it a name. So I'm going to call this load level path. And in Godot script, we tend to name variables like this, where we use little underscores when we go from one word to the next to make it a little bit easier to read. Obviously, if this looked like this, you could read it, but it would kind of be confusing to look at. So we put little underscores here. There's different conventions in different languages, but this is the one that I've noticed in Godot. And so then we just replace this value with what we're loading. And this is called using a variable instead of hard coding. So the variable can change in different scenes. So we're going to change this to load level path. And we also have this like play again button down here. I'm going to go ahead and add this in here as well. Whoops, didn't copy it. Let's try that again. Okay, so you might want to load a different scene when you go to play again, but for now we're going to assume it's the same scene. And so we're just going to make things a little simpler by doing this. So if we go back to our 2D window and select the control, you can now see there's a script variable. Let me make sure I'm not in the way of things. Okay, so here's our script variable. And if I click on the let me zoom in here. So you can see now that variable I just created, load level path, is added here. And if I click on this folder, it's gonna bring up an option for me to choose the scene that I wanna load. So now I can actually choose a scene. I haven't actually created the scene yet, so let's cancel this real quick. So to create the scene, I'm going to leave my main scene the way it is so I can go back and edit it later if I want to. What I'm going to do instead of loading the main scene is I'm going to duplicate the main scene. And I'm going to call this level 1 and click duplicate. And that's what we're actually going to edit for our level 1. So that's what I want to make sure to load. So I'm going to try that again. I'm going to click on the folder, go to scenes and choose level 1 and click open. And that's going to allow us to kind of start from scratch. So let's make sure that works. I'm going to preview the start menu scene. I forgot I have the music. So I'm going to click start game. And there we go. That's our level 1. So that worked out pretty well. So that's basically how we can add different scenes. If I had, if I had the same script in another scene, I could load a different scene by just plugging it into that variable. So that's two of the good things about Godot and programming is that we can use variables to save different information, and we can use the export in our script, this export keyword, to make that variable visible in our editor so that, if you're a developer and you're working with a designer, they don't have to change the code. They can just click on the UI. And even if you're doing both, it's a lot easier to just click on the UI and select something than write a bunch of code to choose which scene to add. Okay, so that's the first part that we have to do. We've updated our start menu, so that's good. Let's go to level 1. Okay, you can see right now that it's basically the same thing as the main scene. We're gonna do a bunch of editing here to turn this into our first level. First, I'm gonna go ahead and kind of clean things up a little bit. So I'm gonna delete like my extra obstacle. I'll leave 1 in here. Let's move it over here for a bit. And let's delete these items. I'm just gonna delete all these guys. And I'm gonna take this one item and move it out of the way for a second. Then this is gonna be a little tedious, but I'm gonna get rid of all my platforms. So I'm just gonna go through and right click to delete all of these little platforms that I added. I wanna start from scratch and think more about my design principles as I build this level. Okay, so let's clear all these guys out. This is the one drawback of Godot, is this part is pretty tedious, so you want to try not to make too many mistakes. Also seems to be running a little slow for me. It's probably because I'm recording, which does eat up a lot of the processor on the computer. Anyway, I'm just gonna erase all these guys real quick. Okay, so now I can start from scratch with my new level. And I'll just leave the player where he is for now. One thing that I want to change before I forget is I'm going to go into my UI. I'm going to go to game over. And now that I've changed the script to use the load level path, it's not going to work unless I put something in there. So I want to load level 1. So I'm going to go to scripts. Oops, not scripts. I'm going to go to scenes and put in level 1 and click open. So now if I die, when I click play again, it's going to load level 1. Okay, so that was pretty good so far. Let's start designing our scene. So in this level, I'm going to try to go over a few different things. I'm going to start with guidance. So we talked about we need guidance for the mechanisms, the obstacles, and rewards. So that's the first thing I'm going to be thinking about as I design the level. I'm going to try to make this relatively short, but as I design, I'm probably going to want to try to change things or do different things. So just bear with me. So I have these platforms, and I kind of want to have two different types of platforms. So I'm actually going to go ahead and duplicate this because I want to have two different colors, and you'll see why in a bit. But anyway, I'm just going to have platforms. I'm going to change the color to these platforms. They were green, but it looks a little bit too much like my snakes and my apples. So I'm just going to make them kind of like brown, like some ground. So I'll call this platforms brown. And then I'll call this platforms, I'll make the other platforms like blue or something. So those I'm just going to use the multi-tile platform. So I'm going to make these kind of like a nice light blue. That's fine. I can change this later if I need to. So that way there'll be a little bit more variety. And so I'm going to start with the brown platforms and just give the player somewhere to land. So let's just put these guys pretty similar to where they were before. But we're just going to give him a little area to land on. We'll put some stuff down here to make it look kind of solid. You guys probably have lots of different platforms that look a lot better than mine, but I'm just working with what I made just to keep things quick. Anyway, so I've got some platforms, so he's going to land there. And I want to go over some basic mechanics. So one of the things we saw in a lot of the examples is we want to make it kind of clear to the player which direction he should go in. And so the first thing I want to do is kind of block off this left area because we want him to go to the right. If you want to go to the left, you can. There's nothing wrong with that, but typically we go to the right. So I want to kind of block off the area on the left so that he won't think that he can go over there. And I also want to make like a little gap so the player knows that they have to jump. So let's block some stuff off first. I'm just going to draw, I'm not going to be too sophisticated here. I'm just going to draw like a big wall. Like this, and then over here. And that's going to prevent the player from going over there. It's a little dumb, but I just want to kind of keep him from actually being able to get over there. And it's tall enough that he can't jump up. Oh, the snake is in there right now. And I can get over here. So let's actually extend this out a bit just so, it doesn't look too glitchy. And then this is kind of like getting ahead of ourselves, but we are at the beginning. So if we want to do a little foreshadowing, okay, let's put the snake inside that block so he knows there's a snake. Foreshadowing obviously isn't gonna like really, it's just one aspect of game design. It's not super necessary, but let's just make a little block for this snake and put the snake in there. So I'm going to go to obstacles, grab the snake, put him in there, and we've got some foreshadowing. So the snake is kind of locked away. He can't hurt us, but we can tell that there's going to be some other stuff going on in this scene. Okay, so now we want to teach the player to jump. So we want to get some mechanics going. So, if I go off the edge, I die. So let's put a little platform over here. And what I want to do is just go ahead and make it about as far away from the player as he can jump. And I tested this a little bit earlier so I wouldn't have to do it during the video, and it's about 5 squares. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and one more. And I'm just going to put another little platform here. And I'm pretty sure the player can make it there. You want to test your scene a lot as you're building it so that you don't make stuff that you're going to have to go undo later. So that worked. So I'm happy that. And so now we've taught the player, like, this is basically how far you can jump. And I also want to teach the player about how high they can jump. And this one is a little tricky because this is actually one of the things that is a sort of unintentional consequence of this code for the player right now is that he can actually jump if he's stuck to a wall. So we want to teach the player that as well. So he can actually get over something that it doesn't look like he can. So let's teach them that. Again, this is just my game. You don't have to do this in your game, but I'm pretty sure he can make it up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as long as he does a little wall jump. So he's going to die if he doesn't do the wall jump. Yeah, so he's going to die if he can't make the wall jump. But if he figures out that he can jump, now he knows that he can do a little wall jump. So that's actually pretty good. We're not letting the player have any other options here. So we don't want to like give them another platform down here so they don't have to learn that. So we want to teach them this mechanic. Hopefully they'll be able to figure it out. You know, if they can't, maybe they need a simpler game. Anyway, you don't have to do that. That's just like one example of teaching the mechanics to the player. Okay, so we've introduced some of the mechanics. Let's introduce some rewards. So I have this reward up here. Let's just throw a bunch of them on this first platform. So, you know, we're just gonna throw them a bunch in here. So with the rewards and the obstacles, I'm gonna be using them a lot. And an easy way to do that is just to duplicate them. I can go over here and find duplicate wherever it is down here. But I can also just do Command D on Mac or Control D on Windows. That's a lot faster. So what I want to do is just duplicate it in place and then drag the duplicate over. And then if I do that again, I can just drag it over again. So that's an easy way to add a bunch of these at once. I'm going to duplicate it again and push it up here. And let's make another one. So we've got a lot of nice little rewards that are going to tell the player, you know, this is where you should be going. Okay, so we can see this. Okay, so we made that jump. That's pretty good. We got a bunch of apples. Okay, we made another jump. All right, so we introduced a bunch of stuff just with 2 jumps. That's pretty good. Let's move on to our obstacles. So I'm gonna close up this items. We have an obstacle over here. Gonna do the same thing. I just duplicate the obstacle, throw it over here somewhere. Okay, so let's introduce the obstacle in a pretty, you know, safe way. So let's add in a platform here. Okay, and we'll just do it a little bit farther down. Oops. Here. Okay. And then I'm just gonna drag my second obstacle down here. And let's just make a couple of them. So that's a little bit scary. So we'll put one here. We'll put one over here and reverse the direction. So I'm going to put the direction at -1. And I'm not going to leave these as activate on player quite yet. So I'm going to use that a little bit later. So we've got these 2 obstacles, but let's also give the player something that they can jump on if they're a little scared. So I'm going to go over to my blue platform, grab my little tile guy, and I'm going to put this up here. It's not going to be super easy to get there, but it is there. So this is also a little bit of branching. We're going to do some more branching in a bit. So let's see how this looks. Remember to test stuff a lot. If you build a bunch of stuff and then you realize you got something wrong, it's pretty annoying to have to go fix it. Okay, so this might be actually too easy because I can just get over here really easily and then I can jump on these guys. So maybe I would actually want to remove that platform, at least at the beginning, to kind of force the player to deal with the snakes. So that they know they can jump on the heads. So let's actually just get rid of this for now. We'll do some branching later. So we'll introduce the snakes real quick. I think we've actually got all of our mechanics. Let's take a look. So we introduce mechanics, obstacles, rewards. Okay, not bad. So let's keep going. Let's do a little bit of branching in this next one. So that's pretty simple for a game like this, like basically giving the player a couple different options that they can weigh. So once they beat these snakes, let's actually introduce our little platform guys now. So we'll give them 2 options. We'll give them like a platform up here, and we'll give them some more snakes down here. So this is kind of like, oh, whoops, I want to make sure to get the brown guy. So we are going to give the player the option to kind of fight some more snakes or use these platforms. And so it's easier to get down here to the snakes, but it's maybe a little more appealing to use the platform. I'm gonna make it a little bit smaller and then add the platform again here. If I was a little less time crunched, I'd probably make 2 different tile sets so I didn't have to switch back and forth as much, but I don't want to do that right now. Okay, so let's duplicate these guys. Another thing I can do is drag to select and duplicate 2 snakes at the same time. And so let's put these guys down here. And so now we're kind of giving a player an option to either attack some more snakes or try to get on these platforms. One thing that you can also do as you're testing is just move the player. Oh, whoops. Okay, let's lock down this metrics. Okay, let's try that again. I'm gonna move the player. Oops, I moved the camera. Okay, let's lock down the camera. Just clicking the selection button, which means I can't select it, and the lock button, so I can't move it. Gonna try one more time. Let's move the player. Okay, so let's move the player up to here. Hopefully he'll kill that snake. So you can also move the player in the scene so that you don't have to spend as much time testing, but just remember to move it back. Okay, so I killed that snake. So now I have to decide, let's kill this guy. I can go down there and fight some more snakes, or I can try to make it to this platform. And this is pretty forgiving because I can go back if I want, but the platforms are too high. So let's just move them down real quick. And I know there's a better way to do this, but I don't want to. So let's just erase these and put it right here. And again, right here. So this is pretty easy. Okay, so I'm gonna choose the platform. Oh, I still can't get up there. Okay, I can do it if I double jump, so that's a little annoying, but let's just leave it. Okay, so now we've got some branching, and typically branching is gonna be followed by either more branching or some bottlenecking. So let's follow this up with a little bit of like a risk or reward. So let's bring the player back into a little bit of safety just by putting a new ground up here to kind of reset things. Oh, and then we can introduce the new snakes as well. So actually, let's do this. Well, okay, we'll bring the player back here. And then let's do a little risk versus reward. So what we'll do is we'll give the player an easy option to jump on these platforms. We'll make it a little trickier than these platforms, but it's basically the easier option. Or they can go through this like snake area, but the snake area also has a bunch of apples. So I'll make this ground again, and I'll make this a little more treacherous. Okay, and then I'll grab some snakes and put them over here. I'll duplicate them again. That's a lot. And then I'm also going to turn these snakes into activate on player. Okay, so I'm going to select these guys and turn activate on player on. So I'm kind of like doing 2 things at once here. If you want to make your level longer, just, you know, do less than 2 things at a time so you can go to each new platform. But I'm going to change the dynamic a little bit here, but you are going to see that the snake will get triggered here. So I could actually leave this as it is, but I'm gonna do some more here. So I'm gonna grab some apples, and we're gonna put a bunch of apples in here as well. So we'll put, whoops, it's kind of hard to, okay, let's put these guys up here, duplicate this. Okay. Somehow I have 2 apples. Okay. Godot can be a little tricky for that, so let's space these guys out. Oh, I have a bunch of them now. I'm just gonna delete this one. Okay. And then And I'll drag the snakes back in. So this is a pretty simplified version of risk versus reward. There's a very obvious reward, which is these nice apples, and a very obvious risk, which are the scary snakes. Okay, so we'll leave that one there. And then we'll give the player another option with the platforms. And so I'll make this one look a little bit trickier so it's not like the most obvious choice. So I'll do like a couple little platforms. I don't know if this is possible. I'm gonna have to test it. Then we could do like a big drop down here, do a couple more platforms. This is also a bit of layering because we've got rewards, we've got risks, we've got different mechanics. So it's hard not to layer, honestly, once you start adding stuff in. I should have moved my player along, but let's do it anyway. So I can get up here. Now I go over here. Okay, now it's like, what are these snakes doing? But if I get close enough, they start to move. I guess I should have him move towards me. It looks a little weird that he moves away. I don't think I can make that platform. So, oh, I also kind of want to move this farther away so that it's not easy for me to get back. So let's do a couple things. Okay, sorry, this is going to be a little annoying, but let's just do this real quick. So first, what I'm going to do is, whoops, I'm going to move these platforms up so it's harder to get up here. So it'll be easy to get here, but you won't be able to get back. So actually I can just do this. I think that should take care of it. If it doesn't, I'm just going to leave it as is. We'll just say that's kind of the concept here. And then I'll put this little guy right here. Okay, so you have to choose either to go up here, then you can choose either to get the snakes or not. And that should be good enough, although now this snake isn't close enough. So let's grab this snake and oops. This is gonna be hard too. So you're not gonna know that these snakes are only gonna get triggered when you move. But that's okay. You could add another platform in here to do that, but I'm not gonna. I guess I could just make those guys not move. Anyway, so the snakes aren't moving. So you kind of got to decide, do I want to try to get those apples? Actually, maybe that's pretty tricky because if I go down and try to get the apple, then he starts to move. That's pretty good. That's a pretty good combination of mechanics. And I also can't get back up here, or I can if I get on a snake. And then I can go up. Okay, let's try the other way. I'm just gonna move my player ahead so I don't have to redo that. Okay. It is kind of creepy that they're just standing there. So if I wanted to, I could write some code to make them move. But anyway, the player can decide to go for the apples or not. So let's see, what have we got? We've got some branching. Okay, we've technically got some bottlenecking, although it's not very extreme. Got some layering. We sort of have a safe zone. And we do definitely have some risk and reward. Gating, I'm not gonna worry about because we'd have to add some other code. So let's ignore that. Let's just move on. We've gotten a few good examples. Obviously, you know, this is a lot longer than my previous level, and it's obviously a lot more structured, but there's only really like, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 stages. You probably want more stages than that. You know, you might want like 5 or 6, but it's up to you and how many things you want to add. Anyway, let's just build the last part of this, which is this is going to be you win the game, as opposed to going to the next level, which is what we'll work on in the next lab. So we're just going to win the game real quick. So if you make it to the end of this area, you just have to jump up here, or you jump down from that platform, and you get to very calmly approach the end game tree, which will also become a portal later on. But for now, it's just going to be the end game, or we'll call it end level portal, and we'll make it. We'll write a couple different scripts that will make it either end the game or the level. So for this one, we're going to have to go back and actually create a whole new scene and add some stuff in there. So we haven't really done this yet. You know, for the player and the obstacles and stuff, I built those scenes for you. I don't know what we did with the rewards, but anyway, we're going to build this scene from scratch. So let's start. We want to click on scenes. We're going to create a new scene. So we click on scenes and we create a new scene. And this is going to be our end level. Let's call this a portal. For now, it's just going to end the game, but we'll turn it into a portal later. So we'll call this our end level portal. And we have to start by creating a scene node. If we don't create a scene node, it's, you know, it doesn't really know what's going on. So we'll call this our end level portal. And there's just a few things that this node needs. So I'm going to click the plus button. One thing is we need an area for the player to run into that we know the player has arrived in. So this is what we use our area 2D for. It's not a collider because we're not going to like hit it. Or it is a collider, but it's not a kinematic body or something like that, or a collision shape, because we can go inside it. So it's just an area 2D, and an area 2D needs a child that is a collision shape, something that knows if the player is inside. So actually what I was referring to before is a static body. Anyway, we have a collision shape. We're going to create that, and then we choose... it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to choose rectangle. And then we're not centered. So let's center. Okay, so we've got our collision shape. Next thing we need is an animated sprite. So we're going to show the tree. And then when we get to the tree, we're going to play the animation. So I'm going to click the plus again and grab an animated sprite. And it put it inside my collision. I don't want that. So let's drag it outside. Okay, that looks better. And then it's saying I need animation frames, so I'm just going to click new sprite frames. That's pretty simple. That's what allows you to do the sprite animation. So you haven't done that before. I usually give you something that does that. Just click on the animation frames and then double click the sprite frames, kind of like the tile set. Okay, so our basic default, we're just going to call this idle, so it's just kind of sitting there. And we just need one frame for this. So I'm going to click on the waffle. I'm going to go into my sprites and find my tree portal. I'm going to click open. And I'm going to set this up like usual, make sure the grid matches, but I only want one frame. You could have it animating the whole time, but I want the animation to change. So I'm just going to add one frame here, but if you have like more frames for the animation, that's fine. Okay, my tree is way bigger than my area. So let's grab that collision shape and let's move it down a little bit. It doesn't actually need to take up the whole tree area, just like part, you know, enough that the player will run into it. That's probably pretty good because the player can't really jump over that. So we'll just leave that as is. And then let's make another animation for when the player runs into it. So I'm going to click plus under animations to create a new animation. And I'm going to click here, and this is going to be, let's just call this end. So when we reach the end of the level, and that animation, we have to make sure that matches the code later. Maybe not today, we'll see. Anyway, let's add in our frames. So we're just going to add the tree portal again. We've already got the 2x2, so that's good. And I'm just going to click the 3 frames that are left. And so if we want to see what that looks like, I can click playing on. That looks pretty good, and I'll just save that. And we're almost done. We just have to add in a script here. So we're actually going to create a new script from scratch and add it into our scene. So I'm going to click on the end level portal. Going to go to script. There's an empty. I'm going to click that and click new script. And this isn't a portal yet. This is just the end of the game. We'll add the portal script later. But for now, this is just going to be you win the game. So we'll call this win game. And we will create that. And when you create a script, it's going to open up the script editor for you. So it's going to look like this, pretty straightforward. We just need to actually delete everything that's in here. And what we're going to do is grab a reference to what we're going to make later is like a you win scene. So we'll talk about how that's going to work in a second. So what we're going to do is say, basically, actually, I'm wondering if we should build that first. No, that's okay. We're here. Let's just make this. So this one, we're just going to make a new variable. And let's actually put on ready in front. So that means it's going to load it before the scene loads. So we'll say on ready variable. So this is a new reference. And what this is going to be a reference to is the UI that says you win. So let's say WinGameUI. And this is going to get a reference. It's going to look a little bit like if you've looked at the player script before. Let's open that up. And there's a lot of different ways to do this. Honestly, this isn't the best way to do it, but it's an easy way to do it. So I have this onReady var game over, and that references the game over that is already there. We're going to reference something that we're going to add shortly. So we're going to call this, so we have the $ to reference something in the scene. And then this is going to be inside the scene. So we have to go out one directory and then go into our UI section. And this is going to be the win game. We'll just call it that. So that's pretty straightforward. So then we just need to connect our area to this script. So what we do is click on the area 2D and go to the collision shape and go to node. Area 2D is right. And let's actually give this a name that, tells us what it is. So let's call this, end level. And so we're gonna click on body entered. So that's when the player comes into that blue area. So I'm gonna double click body entered. That's gonna create a new method for me. So I'm gonna click connect and it brings us back to our script. And here it is, we can write our script. It has this like pass here, which is like if you write a function, but it doesn't have any code in it, it's gonna create an error. So they put that pass in there in case you add something by mistake, it doesn't break your game. So the first thing we want to do is make sure that the body that's entered the tree is the player and not like a snake or an apple or something like that. So we can say if body.name equals, so body is like whatever came into the area, and if is saying like if this thing is something else, and then the two equal signs means they're the same. And so we want to check if the body.name is player. Player is inside quotation marks because it's a string, which is like a way of representing data rather than parts of our code, like the variables like body and the function and stuff like that. And so basically all that's saying is if we look in our levels, in our level 1, we have this player body, it's a kinematic body. And if that is the player, then we're gonna do whatever the code says. So we wanna make sure that it's the player first. So I'll also, post this code later. So don't worry if it's a bit confusing. So if that body is the player, we're going to say WinGameUI.visible equals true. So we're going to show that WinGameUI. So this is almost exactly the same thing as what happens when the game over. We show this like game over UI. Let's go back to WinGame. And then we also want to change the animation. So let's grab a reference to our animated sprite. So we can do the same thing here on ready var. Let's just call this sprite equals, this time we can just say $animated sprite. And that's because the animated sprite is inside of this EndLevelPortal. The WinGameUI is outside, which is why we have to use this more complicated syntax. And then we're just going to say sprite.play, and here's where we're going to play the end animation that we created. So as long as this value is the same as what you called it here, this should work. So let's go back to the script. I think that's everything we need to do. And one thing that we could do to make this script just a little bit better is we could make sure that the WinGameUI is invisible if we forget to turn it off. So we could say func ready. So all of the like built-in Godot functions start with a little underscore. So that way you're less likely to like overwrite the function by accident. So func ready is a function that executes when the scene starts, and it does a bunch of stuff to make sure that we're ready to, you know, make things work. So what we can do is just say WinGameUI.visible equals false. So that way we'll be sure that this is false when we start the game. So that's that script. Hopefully that wasn't too confusing. Obviously let me know if you have questions, but now let's stick this into our game and let's hook it up to our other UI. Actually, let's make the UI before we put it into the game. So let's, the way I'm going to do that is actually just to duplicate the game over scene and then just change it to you win. And so we'll have these two different things that essentially act the same. You'll still be able to play again or quit. So I'm going to duplicate this and I'm going to call this win game and click duplicate. Oh, I accidentally saved the WinGame GD script inside scenes. This is something that I do a lot. It's kind of annoying. Obviously it doesn't really matter where it is, but I like to make sure it's in the right place. So I'm just going to clear the script real quick. I don't have to change the code. It still works the same. I just want to go into scenes and make sure this GD script is inside my scripts folder. I probably didn't pay attention when I created the script, so that was my fault. So let's just go add the script again. We'll say load, go to scripts, and go to WinGame. Okay, that should be fine. So now we have to just set up our WinGame scene real quick. So I'm just going to open this up, and I'm not going to change anything in here. Let's just change the control node to WinGame so we know which one this is. And we do have to set up this path right here. We're just gonna, if we do win the game and we want to play again, we just want to load level 1 again. So I'm going to open that there. And then we just need to change this game over graphic. So I'm going to select this. I'm going to clear the graphic. Then I'm going to load. Go to sprites, and here's my you win. I'm gonna click open. I'm gonna click save. So it's nice to reuse that so I don't have to like go through that whole thing again. So now I have game over, you win. Okay, I'm almost done. I'm gonna go back to level 1. And first I'm gonna update my UI. So I'm gonna go to the UI and click the link to add in the win game scene. So this will get triggered when I get to the tree. And there it is, you can see it. I'm going to turn it off, but it'll also turn off itself. And my player is pretty close to the end, so I'm just going to test this real quick. So I have to add in the new scene that I created. So that's the EndLevelPortal. I'm going to open that up. It's going to be, where is it? Oh, it's inside of my win game. That's not where I want it to be. Let's drag it down here. Okay, it's nice and big, easy to see, so that's good. So let's drag it all the way over to the end. It's maybe a little too big, but whatever. I'll put it right there. So it should be pretty easy to get there. And I think everything should be set up, so let's give that a try. Okay. Okay, I got up here, got up here, got up here. Okay. And nice. Okay, you win, and we get the little animation. So that's actually pretty good. That was pretty much everything that I needed to do. Let's just test this button. Yes, that works. So I assume the quit button works, but we can test it. Okay, quit. So that's pretty good. There's other things that I might want to change, like make a few more scenes, maybe introduce the fact that you can trigger the snakes a little bit earlier on their own. But we managed to introduce a lot of our different concepts in a pretty short space. So that's pretty cool. So let's just go ahead and I think wrap things up. Yeah, I think that's basically all we need to do for this. So let me know if you have any questions during the lab and we can go over them. And I will see you guys in class.